My name is Beverly, and I'm 32 years old. For my entire life, I've been the daughter who never said no, the one who dropped everything when family called, the reliable one who sacrificed her dreams, her money, her peace of mind for the people I loved most. I thought that loyalty was my strength. I thought it made me a good person. But 3 weeks ago, I discovered that the very thing I was most proud of was exactly what my own mother and brother planned to use to destroy me. They were going to let me take the fall for crimes I never committed, and they felt confident I'd do it because, well, I never say no to family. Before we dive into this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments below. Hit that like button if you've ever felt taken advantage of by family. And don't forget to subscribe because this story gets absolutely wild. Let me paint you a picture of who I was before everything fell apart. Growing up, I was the kid who covered for my younger brother Gerald when he didn't do his homework. I was 8 years old, writing his book reports because he'd rather play video games. When he got in trouble at school for fighting, I was the one who convinced our mom it wasn't really his fault. When our father walked out on us when I was 16 and Gerald was 14, I didn't just watch our mother Doris struggle. I acted. I had earned a full academic scholarship to State University. Full ride. 4 years of tuition, room, board, everything paid for. But our mom was working 2 jobs just to keep the lights on, and Gerald was getting into more trouble without a father figure. So I made what I thought was the noble choice. I turned down the scholarship and got a job at the local dental office as a receptionist. I told myself it was temporary, just until we got back on our feet. 20 years later, I was still there. But I had worked my way up to office manager, and I was good at it. Really good. I managed 12 employees, handled all the finances, coordinated with insurance companies, and built relationships with patients that kept our practice thriving. I made $65,000 a year, which isn't wealthy, but it was stable. It was enough. Gerald, on the other hand, had turned being unreliable into an art form. After barely graduating high school, he bounced between jobs like a pinball. Construction work lasted 3 months before he hurt his back. Sales positions never worked out because he couldn't handle rejection. He tried opening a landscaping business that folded when he spent the startup money on poker games. Every failure was someone else's fault. Every setback was just bad luck. But here's the thing about being the responsible sibling. You don't just enable the irresponsible one, you become their safety net. When Gerald couldn't make rent, he'd call me. When his car got repossessed, he'd ask to borrow mine for weeks at a time. When he needed someone to co-sign for a business loan because his credit was destroyed, who do you think he turned to? That's right, me. Because Beverly never says no to family. My mother reinforced this dynamic every chance she got. She'd call me whenever Gerald was in trouble, and her voice would take on this pleading tone. Beverly, honey, you know how Gerald struggles. You've always been so responsible, so capable. Family takes care of family. And I'd cave. Every single time. I'd write the check, make the phone call, clean up the mess. When Gerald was 28, he moved into my basement because he'd been evicted from his apartment. What was supposed to be a 2-week stay turned into 2 years. 2 years of him eating my food, using my electricity, bringing different women home at all hours, and leaving messes everywhere. But whenever I'd get frustrated and hint that maybe it was time for him to find his own place, my mother would remind me about family loyalty. He's trying to get back on his feet, she'd say. You have such a good heart, Beverly. That's what I've always loved about you. You never turn your back on family. The praise felt good. It felt like love. It felt like being valued. So I kept doing it. 6 months ago, Gerald announced he was starting a new business. Cryptocurrency consulting, he called it. He claimed he'd been studying digital currencies and blockchain technology, and he was ready to help other people invest wisely. He showed me websites and YouTube videos, threw around terms like, quote, portfolio diversification and market volatility. For once, he seemed genuinely excited about something legitimate. He asked me to co-sign for another business loan, $15,000 to get his consulting practice off the ground. Office space, computer equipment, marketing materials. I hesitated because I'd been burned before, but Gerald seemed different this time, more focused, more serious. And my mother was so proud of him for finally finding his passion. So I signed. Because family takes care of family, looking back, the warning signs were everywhere. I just chose not to see them, because I wanted so badly to believe that Gerald had finally turned his life around. But over the past 6 months, strange things started happening that should have set off every alarm bell in my head. Gerald began asking me for money more frequently, but these weren't small requests anymore. First, it was $500 for specialized software for his cryptocurrency business. Then, it was $800 for a high-level conference where he'd learn advanced trading strategies. Then, $1,000 because a major client needed him to demonstrate his investment capabilities by managing a larger portfolio. Each request came with elaborate explanations and urgent deadlines. He'd show up at my door late at night, pacing around my living room, explaining how this particular opportunity was going to change everything. His eyes would be bright, almost manic, and he'd talk so fast I could barely follow his reasoning. But he always ended with the same appeal to family loyalty. Beverly, I know I've asked for help before, but this is different. This is my chance to finally be successful, to pay you back for everything you've done for me. Just this one more time, and then I'll never need to ask again. And I'd write the check. But it wasn't just the money that started bothering me, it was the people. Gerald would bring strangers to my house when he was still living in my basement. Rough-looking men with expensive cars who'd sit in my driveway having intense conversations with my brother. When I'd ask Gerald who they were, he'd wave off my concerns. Just business associates, he'd say. Potential investors. You wouldn't understand the crypto world, Beverly. It's complicated. I started finding things in my house that didn't belong to me or Gerald. Packages addressed to names I didn't recognize but sent to my address. When I'd ask Gerald about them, he'd claim they were business materials he'd ordered for clients who didn't want delivery sent to their own homes for privacy reasons. Then there were the phone calls. Gerald would step outside to take certain calls, but sometimes I'd catch fragments of conversations through the window. Words like merchandise and clean records and moving product. When I'd ask him about it later, he'd act confused, like he had no idea what I was talking about. Gerald's girlfriend Marlene started acting strange around me too. We'd always gotten along well. She was a sweet girl, worked as a nurse at the county hospital, seemed to genuinely care about Gerald despite his flaws. But lately, whenever she'd come over, she'd barely make eye contact with me. She'd seem nervous, jumpy, like she was afraid of saying the wrong thing. One evening, I came home from work to find Marlene sitting at my kitchen table crying. Gerald wasn't home, and she was just sitting there with tears streaming down her face. When I asked her what was wrong, she looked at me with this expression of pure anguish. Beverly, she started, then stopped herself. I can't. I shouldn't. Gerald would be so angry if he knew I was even thinking about... Thinking about what? I pressed. Marlene, what's going on? But she just shook her head, wiped her tears, and left without another word. The next time I saw her, she acted like the conversation had never happened. My mother's behavior was changing too. Doris had always been direct with me, sometimes brutally honest. She'd never hesitated to ask me for help with Gerald, or to explain exactly what kind of trouble he'd gotten himself into. But lately, when I'd ask specific questions about his new business or express concerns about some of his behavior, she'd become evasive. Oh, you know Gerald? She'd say with a forced laugh. He's always been creative in his business approaches. I don't pretend to understand all that computer stuff he's doing now. But I could tell she was holding something back. There was a tension in her voice, a careful quality to her words that hadn't been there before. She'd change the subject quickly whenever I brought up Gerald's work, or ask me about my own job instead. The breaking point came 3 weeks ago when I discovered something that made my blood run cold. Gerald had finally moved out of my basement and into his own apartment, but he'd left behind a laptop that he claimed was broken. I was cleaning out the basement and decided to see if the computer could be salvaged. Maybe I could donate it or use it myself. When I powered it on, I realized it wasn't broken at all. And it wasn't password protected. Gerald had been careless, probably assuming I'd never bothered to check it. What I found in his files made me physically sick. Spreadsheets full of financial transactions I didn't understand. Email conversations about moving money through various accounts. PDFs of official-looking documents with my name on them. My address. My social security number. References to my business connections at the dental office. Plans that mentioned using my clean record and established reputation. For purposes that were clearly illegal. I spent hours that night going through everything, trying to understand what I was looking at. The more I read, the more I realized that Gerald hadn't just been asking me for money. He'd been systematically using my identity, my address, my business relationships, to build some kind of criminal enterprise. And from what I could tell, if anyone got caught, it would look like I was the mastermind behind it all. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out how I'd been so blind. How had I missed all the signs? How had I let my loyalty to family cloud my judgment so completely? But the worst was yet to come. 3 Sundays ago, I was supposed to have dinner at my mother's house. It's a tradition we've kept for years. Every Sunday at 5 o'clock, I'd drive over to the little ranch house where I grew up, and we'd share a home-cooked meal. Gerald joined us when he felt like it, which was usually when he needed something. That particular Sunday, I'd had to work late because one of our dental hygienists had called in sick, and we'd had to reschedule a bunch of appointments. I was running about 30 minutes behind, and I tried calling my mother to let her know, but her phone went straight to voicemail. I figured she was probably cooking and had her hands full, so I just drove over. I pulled into the driveway and noticed Gerald's beat-up Honda Civic parked on the street. That was normal. What wasn't normal was that all the curtains in the front of the house were drawn tight, even though it was still light outside. My mother liked natural light and usually kept her living room bright and airy. I used my key to let myself in through the front door, but instead of calling out like I normally would, something made me hesitate. I could hear voices coming from the living room. My mother and Gerald were having what sounded like an intense conversation, and their tone made me freeze in the entryway. "I'm telling you, Mom, this is getting out of hand," Gerald was saying. His voice had an edge of panic that I'd never heard before. "The feds are asking questions, real questions, about the accounts, about the transfers, about the business addresses. It's not just local cops anymore." My heart started pounding. Feds? Federal investigators? What had Gerald gotten himself into? "Calm down." My mother's voice was steady, almost businesslike. "We knew this might happen eventually. That's why we set things up the way we did." "But what if they arrest me?" Gerald's voice cracked. "What if they figure out the money laundering? What if they trace everything back to me?" There was a pause, and then my mother spoke in a tone that will haunt me for the rest of my life. Cold. Calculating. Completely without emotion. "They won't arrest you, Gerald, because if it comes to that, Beverly will take the fall." I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. The world tilted, and I had to grab the wall to steady myself. "Beverly will take the fall." My own mother was talking about me like I was some kind of insurance policy. "Are you sure she'll do it?" Gerald asked. "I mean, we're talking about serious charges here. Fraud, money laundering, tax evasion. She could go to prison for years." My mother's laugh was bitter and knowing. "Gerald, honey, you've been living with your sister for 2 years. Have you ever, even once, seen Beverly say no to family? She co-signed your loan. She let you use her address for business purposes. She's already financially connected to everything you've done, and she loves us too much to throw us under the bus. But what if she figures out what we've been doing? What if she realizes we've been setting her up?" "She won't," my mother said with absolute certainty. "Beverly sees what she wants to see. She wants to believe that you're finally successful, so she'll keep believing it right up until the moment they put handcuffs on her. And even then, she'll probably think it's all just a big misunderstanding that she can fix by being loyal and taking responsibility." I was shaking so hard I thought my knees might give out. These were the people I'd sacrificed everything for. The people I had protected and supported and loved unconditionally my entire adult life. And they were planning to let me go to prison for crimes I didn't even know were being committed. "Don't worry," my mother continued. "She's never said no to family before, and she won't start now. Even if it means saving your life." Gerald let out a long breath. "God, Mom, sometimes I think you're scarier than the criminals I've been dealing with." "I'm protecting my son," she replied simply. "Beverly's strong. She'll survive whatever happens. But you? You wouldn't last 5 minutes in federal prison. So yes, if it comes down to choosing between my children, I choose the one who needs me more." I had heard enough. Actually, I had heard far more than enough. I backed out of the house as quietly as I could, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get my keys into the car ignition. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, trying to process what I'd just learned. Everything made sense now. The mysterious packages sent to my address, the business documents with my name on them, Gerald's sudden interest in using my office connections to meet, quote, potential investors. The way my mother had been acting strange whenever I asked questions. They hadn't been protecting me from Gerald's problems. They'd been using me as the solution to Gerald's problems. I drove home in a daze, my mind reeling with the implications of what I'd discovered. How long had they been planning this? How many crimes had been committed using my identity? How much evidence was there connecting me to things I'd never done? But underneath the shock and fear, something else was growing. something I'd never felt toward my family before. Rage. Pure, burning, clarifying rage. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't eat. I couldn't think about anything except that conversation and what it meant for my life. But by Monday morning, something had shifted inside me. The shock was giving way to determination. If Gerald and my mother thought I was going to be their convenient scapegoat, they were about to learn just how wrong they could be. I called in sick to work, which I'd done maybe 3 times in 20 years. Then I drove to the public library because I didn't want to use my home computer for what I was about to do. I needed to understand exactly what Gerald had been doing and how deep my involvement appeared to go. Using the laptop I'd found in my basement, I began systematically going through every file, every email, every document that Gerald had left behind. What I discovered was worse than I'd imagined. Gerald hadn't just been running some small-scale scam. He'd been operating a sophisticated financial fraud scheme for at least 18 months, and my name was all over it. He'd opened business bank accounts using my address and forged documents that made it appear I was a partner in his cryptocurrency consulting firm. He'd used my social security number to establish credit lines for business equipment. He'd listed me as a reference on applications for merchant services that allowed him to process credit card payments from his victims. The victims. God, there were so many victims. Elderly people who'd trusted Gerald to invest their retirement savings in cryptocurrency. Small business owners who'd paid him to help them accept digital payments. Young couples who'd given him their life savings to invest in what he'd promised were, quote, guaranteed returns in the emerging digital currency market. Gerald had taken their money and run it through a complex web of accounts and shell companies, keeping the majority for himself while making small payouts to early investors to maintain the illusion of legitimacy. It was a classic Ponzi scheme, dressed up with modern technology and financial jargon. And according to the paper trail, I was the primary business partner. My address was the official business location. My name was on incorporation documents. My background in financial management at the dental office was cited as evidence of my expertise in handling money. Gerald had even created fake email accounts in my name and used them to communicate with investors. If federal investigators were closing in, like Gerald had said, then I wasn't just going to be accused of being involved. I was going to be accused of being the leader. I spent 3 days documenting everything, making copies, organizing evidence. I researched federal fraud statutes and money laundering laws. I looked up conviction rates and typical sentences. What I learned terrified me. If I was charged and convicted of what Gerald had actually done, I was looking at 15 to 20 years in federal prison. 20 years. I'd be 52 when I got out, if I got out. My career would be over. My reputation would be destroyed. My life would be gone. But I also learned something else during those 3 days of research. Gerald had made mistakes. Big ones. The kind of mistakes that left evidence trails that showed I couldn't possibly have been involved in the planning or execution of his crimes. I just had to be smart about how I used that evidence. On Thursday, I called my friend Janet, who'd gone to law school and now worked as a criminal defense attorney in the city. I'd known Janet since high school, and she was one of the few people I trusted completely. I told her I needed to meet with her urgently about a legal matter, and she agreed to see me that evening. Janet's office was in a modern building downtown, all glass and steel and impressive views of the city skyline. But I wasn't there to admire the architecture. I was there to save my life. "Beverly," Janet said as I sat down across from her desk, "you look terrible. What's going on?" I handed her a thumb drive containing everything I'd found and spent the next 2 hours explaining the whole situation. Janet's expression grew more serious with every detail I shared. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time, just looking at the documents I'd brought. "This is bad," she finally said. "Really bad. If federal prosecutors decide to pursue this, they're going to come at you hard. The evidence makes it look like you were the experienced financial professional who masterminded this whole operation while your brother was just the front man." My heart sank. "So you think I'm going to prison?" "Not necessarily," Janet said carefully. "But we need to be strategic about this. The good news is that there are inconsistencies in the evidence that support your story. The timing of certain transactions, the sophistication of the financial instruments, the fact that you were working full-time at the dental office during periods when someone would have had to be managing this operation full-time." She pulled up something on her computer. "The better news is that federal prosecutors love cases where they can flip co-conspirators against each other. If we approach them first, if we come forward with evidence of your brother's deception and your mother's involvement in the cover-up, there's a good chance they'll see you as a victim rather than a perpetrator. What are you saying? I'm saying we need to get ahead of this. We need to contact the FBI before they contact you. We need to show them that you're cooperating, that you're horrified by what happened, and that you're willing to help them build a case against the people who actually committed these crimes. It felt surreal, sitting in that office, talking about building a federal case against my own family. But what choice did I have? Gerald and my mother had already decided I was expendable. They'd made their choice. Now I had to make mine. There's something else, Janet said, her voice gentle. If we're going to do this, you need to be prepared for the possibility that your family will never forgive you. Cooperating with federal investigators, providing evidence against your brother, that's going to feel like the ultimate betrayal to them. I thought about Gerald's voice, casual and unconcerned, as he'd discussed letting me go to prison for his crimes. I thought about my mother, coldly calculating that I was more expendable than he was. They betrayed me first, I said. Over the next week, I prepared for what I knew would be the most difficult confrontation of my life. But I wasn't going to ambush Gerald and my mother with federal agents. I wasn't going to have them arrested without giving them a chance to explain themselves, even though they'd never intended to give me the same courtesy. I was going to expose them in front of the family that had always seen me as the reliable one, the good daughter, the one who sacrificed for everyone else's benefit. I wanted witnesses. I wanted people who had known us all our lives to hear exactly what Gerald and my mother had been planning. My mother's birthday was coming up on Saturday, and she'd planned her usual family barbecue. All the aunts and uncles would be there, plus my cousins and their kids. It was always a big gathering, the kind of family event where everyone felt comfortable speaking freely because we were all among people who loved us. Perfect. I spent the week preparing. I organized all the evidence into a clear chronological presentation. I practiced what I was going to say, how I was going to explain what had been happening without getting too emotional or defensive. I made copies of the most damning documents and put together a timeline that showed exactly how Gerald had been using my identity. Most importantly, I charged my phone and tested the recording app I'd downloaded. If I was going to do this, I wanted everything documented. The night before the barbecue, I barely slept. I kept going over my plan, wondering if I was doing the right thing. These were my family members, people I'd loved my entire life. Was I really going to destroy those relationships forever? But then I'd remember that conversation I'd overheard. Beverly will take the fall. She's never said no to family before. The casual way they'd discussed my willingness to go to prison for crimes I hadn't committed. They'd already made their choice about what my life was worth to them. Saturday arrived bright and sunny, perfect weather for a family barbecue. I got to my mother's house early to help set up, just like I always did. Gerald was already there, arranging chairs in the backyard, acting like everything was normal. My mother was in the kitchen, preparing her famous potato salad, humming to herself like she didn't have a care in the world. "Beverly," she called out when she saw me. Perfect timing. "Can you help me carry these serving dishes outside?" I smiled and nodded, playing my part. "Of course, Mom, whatever you need." As the afternoon wore on and family members arrived, I felt like I was watching everything through a strange filter. Uncle Raymond telling the same stories he always told. Aunt Clara fussing over the grandchildren. My cousin Patricia complaining about her job at the bank. Normal family dynamics. Normal conversations. While I sat there knowing I was about to detonate a bomb in the middle of it all. Gerald seemed relaxed, confident even. He was telling people about his successful new business, accepting congratulations and praise for finally getting his life together. He caught my eye a few times and smiled, probably thinking I was proud of him too. My mother was in her element, playing the role of the family matriarch, making sure everyone had enough food and telling embarrassing stories about his kids. At one point, she put her arm around my shoulders and announced to the gathered family how grateful she was to have such a responsible daughter. "Beverly has always been my rock," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I don't know what Gerald and I would have done without her all these years. She's the kind of person who would do anything for family." The irony was so thick I almost choked on it. As the sun started to set and people were finishing their dessert, I knew it was time. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. But I stood up and cleared my throat. "Actually," I said, my voice carrying across the quiet backyard, "there's something I need to share with everyone. Something about family loyalty and what it really means." The conversation at the barbecue went quiet as 23 family members turned to look at me. I could see curiosity in some faces, mild concern in others. Gerald looked slightly annoyed, probably thinking I was about to give some sentimental speech about family bonds. He had no idea what was coming. 3 weeks ago, I began, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. I discovered something that changed everything I thought I knew about the people I love most in this world. I pulled out my phone and held it up so everyone could see it. I'm going to play you a recording. It's a conversation between Mom and Gerald that I accidentally overheard when I arrived early for Sunday dinner. I want everyone to listen very carefully. Gerald's face went white. My mother dropped the plate she was holding. I pressed play. My mother's voice came through the phone speaker, clear and unmistakable. They won't arrest you, Gerald, because if it comes to that, Beverly will take the fall. The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop in that backyard. I let the recording play for another 30 seconds, making sure everyone heard Gerald asking if I would really go to prison for him, and my mother's confident response that I'd never said no to family before. When I stopped the recording, the silence stretched on for what felt like hours, but was probably only 10 or 15 seconds. Then everyone started talking at once. What the hell was that? My Uncle Raymond demanded. Beverly, what's going on? My Aunt Claire asked, her voice shrill with shock. Gerald found his voice first. Beverly, you're taking that completely out of context. We were just talking hypothetically about... Hypothetically? I cut him off. Gerald, shut up. Just shut up for once in your life, and let me explain to our family what you've been doing. I pulled out the folder of documents I'd prepared and began distributing copies to the adults in the group. Financial records, bank statements, email printouts, business incorporation documents with my forged signature. For the past 18 months, I said, my voice getting stronger as I went on, Gerald has been running a financial fraud scheme. He's been stealing money from elderly people and small business owners by promising them guaranteed returns on cryptocurrency investments. He's been using my name, my address, my social security number, and my professional reputation to make himself look legitimate. I pointed to specific sections of the documents as I talked. He forged my signature on business incorporation papers. He opened bank accounts in my name without my knowledge. He created fake email accounts using my name to communicate with his victims. And if federal investigators arrest anyone for these crimes, all the evidence points to me as the mastermind. Gerald was on his feet now, his face red with anger and panic. You don't understand the complexity of the cryptocurrency market, Beverly. Those weren't scams, they were high-risk investments that didn't pan out. Everyone understood the risks. Really? I pulled out another document. Then explain this email where you promised Mrs. Henderson from Oak Street a guaranteed 20% return on her retirement savings. Explain this contract where you told the Martinez family they couldn't lose money because cryptocurrency always goes up in value. Explain this bank transfer where you moved $50,000 from client accounts into your personal checking account. My mother was trying to regain control of the situation. Beverly, honey, you're obviously upset, but this isn't the time or place for this kind of discussion. This is family business that should be handled privately. Family business? I turned to face her directly. Mom, you just heard yourself on that recording, talking about how I'd be willing to go to prison to protect Gerald. You've been helping him set me up to take the fall for his crimes, and you call that family business? I was trying to protect both of my children, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. No, I said firmly. You were trying to sacrifice one of your children to save the other. You decided that my life was worth less than Gerald's comfort. The family members who were reading through the documents were getting visibly upset. My cousin Patricia, who worked at a bank, looked up from the financial records with horror on her face. Beverly, she said, this is serious fraud. Like, federal prison serious. How long has this been going on? Before I could answer, Gerald exploded. This is unbelievable. Beverly, you're my sister. How can you do this to me? How can you betray family like this? The word betray hit me like a physical blow, and something inside me snapped. Betray? I stood up and faced him directly. Gerald, you stole my identity. You committed crimes in my name. You set me up to go to prison for 20 years for things I never did, and I'm betraying you? We're family, he shouted. Family protects each other. You're right, I said, my voice deadly calm. Family should protect each other. So explain to me how letting me go to federal prison was protecting me. Gerald couldn't answer that. He just stood there, opening and closing his mouth like a fish out of water. My Uncle Raymond, who had been reading through the documents, looked up with an expression of disgust. Gerald, did you really steal money from old people? It wasn't stealing, Gerald said desperately. It was investing. The cryptocurrency market is volatile. Sometimes investments don't work out. This isn't an investment, my cousin Patricia said, holding up a bank statement. This is you taking people's money and spending it on yourself. Look at these transactions. $5,000 at a casino. $8,000 for a car payment. $12,000 in cash withdrawals. Where's the cryptocurrency? Where are the investment accounts? Gerald's explanation became increasingly frantic and nonsensical. He talked about market timing and technical analysis and blockchain technology, but he couldn't explain where the money had gone or why there was no evidence of any actual cryptocurrency purchases. My mother tried a different approach. Even if Gerald made some mistakes, airing family problems in public like this isn't going to help anyone. Beverly, you're hurting all of us by handling this the wrong way. The wrong way? I pulled out my phone again. Mom, should I play the part of the recording where you laugh about how I'll probably think it's all a misunderstanding even when they put handcuffs on me? Should I share the part where you tell Gerald that you'd rather sacrifice me than see him face consequences for his actions? That's not what I meant, she said weakly. That's exactly what you meant. You both decided that I was expendable. You made plans for my life without consulting me. You were going to let me go to prison for crimes I didn't commit, and you felt confident I'd go along with it because I've never said no to family before. I looked around at the faces of my extended family. Some looked shocked, some looked angry, some looked sad. But none of them were looking at Gerald and my mother with anything resembling support or understanding. Well, you were wrong, I continued, because I'm saying no now. No. I will not go to prison for Gerald's crimes. No, I will not sacrifice my life to clean up his mess. No, I will not let you destroy me to save him. I pulled out one final document and held it up. Yesterday, I met with FBI Agent Thompson and Agent Chen. I turned over all the evidence of Gerald's fraud scheme and my mother's involvement in covering it up. I explained how they used my identity without my consent and how they planned to let me take responsibility for crimes I never committed. The backyard erupted in chaos. Gerald started screaming at me, calling me every name in the book. My mother burst into tears. Several family members started talking at once, some asking questions, some expressing outrage, some trying to calm everyone down. But I wasn't done yet. Gerald, I said loudly enough to be heard over the commotion, you have until Monday morning to turn yourself in to the FBI and confess to what you've done. If you don't, they'll come looking for you. And Mom, you need to decide right now whether you're going to keep covering for him or start telling the truth about what you knew and when you knew it. You can't do this to us, my mother pleaded. We're your family. No, I said, picking up my purse and walking toward the gate. Family doesn't sacrifice each other. Family doesn't commit crimes in each other's names. Family doesn't plan to let each other go to prison for things they didn't do. I paused at the gate and turned back to look at them one more time. You taught me that I should never say no to family. But you forgot to teach me what to do when family says no to me first. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Gerald was arrested on Wednesday morning at his apartment. He'd tried to run, but it's hard to disappear when federal agents have access to your credit card records and cell phone data. They found him at a motel 3 states away, hiding under a fake name that was so obviously false it was almost comical. The charges were extensive: wire fraud, money laundering, identity theft, tax evasion, and operating an unlicensed investment business. The prosecutor told me they'd identified at least 47 victims who had lost a combined total of over $800,000 to Gerald's scheme. Some of those victims were elderly people who had lost their entire retirement savings. My mother was charged as an accessory after the fact for helping Gerald cover up his crimes, and for conspiring to obstruct justice by planning to let me take responsibility for his actions. Her charges were less severe than Gerald's, but at 71 years old, even a short prison sentence would be devastating. Gerald's trial was a media circus. The local news picked up the story because of the family betrayal angle, and it became one of those cautionary tales that people love to share on social media. Local woman discovers family planned to frame her for financial crimes. The comment sections were brutal. Some people called me a hero for standing up to family members who were willing to sacrifice me. Others called me a traitor for turning in my own brother and mother. The keyboard warriors had plenty of opinions about what I should have done differently, but none of them had ever been in my position. Gerald was convicted on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 12 years in federal prison and ordered him to pay restitution to his victims. During his sentencing hearing, he gave a rambling speech about how family betrayal was worse than financial fraud, and how I had destroyed our family by refusing to stand by him in his time of need. Even facing 12 years in prison, he still didn't think what he'd done to me was wrong. My mother pled guilty to her charges in exchange for a reduced sentence. She got 18 months in minimum security prison and 3 years of probation. At her sentencing, she apologized to the victims of Gerald's crimes, but never apologized to me. Not once. The extended family was divided. Some of them understood why I'd done what I did and supported my decision to protect myself. Others felt like I should have found a way to handle the situation without involving law enforcement. A few stopped speaking to me entirely. But here's what I learned from all of this. The people who were angry at me for protecting myself from being framed for crimes I didn't commit were never really on my side to begin with. They were invested in the old family dynamic, where I was the responsible one, who sacrificed everything for everyone else's benefit. When I refused to play that role anymore, they couldn't handle it. The people who truly loved me, who saw me as a person rather than just a function, those people understood that I'd had no choice. They understood that loyalty is supposed to be mutual, and that family is supposed to protect each other, not sacrifice each other. I went through months of therapy to process the trauma of discovering that the people I'd loved most in the world had been planning to destroy my life. It wasn't easy learning to trust my own judgment again, after being manipulated for so long. It wasn't easy accepting that I'd been an enabler, that my desire to be seen as the good daughter had blinded me to red flags that should have been obvious. But I also learned something powerful about myself. When my back was against the wall, when everything I'd worked for my entire adult life was threatened, I found strength I didn't know I had. I found the courage to say no when saying no meant everything. I'm still working at the dental office, and my reputation in the community has been restored. The FBI investigation proved conclusively that I'd been a victim, not a perpetrator, and the story of how I'd helped them build their case actually enhanced my standing with many people. I've started dating someone new, a man named David who works as a teacher at the local high school. He knows my whole story, and he says he admires how I handled an impossible situation. We're taking things slow, but for the first time in my life, I'm in a relationship with someone who doesn't expect me to sacrifice my well-being for their benefit. I've also started volunteering with a nonprofit organization that helps people who've been victims of financial fraud. Many of Gerald's victims were elderly people who were too ashamed to report the crimes initially, and I help them understand that being scammed doesn't make them stupid or weak. It makes them human. Gerald is serving his sentence at a federal prison about 4 hours away. I haven't visited him, and I don't plan to. He writes me letters sometimes, but I don't read them. My cousin Patricia tells me he's still telling people that I'm the one who betrayed the family, that I should have found a way to protect him without involving the authorities. He still doesn't understand that he betrayed me first. My mother was released from prison 8 months ago. She's living in a small apartment across town, and according to relatives, she's struggling financially and emotionally. A few family members have suggested that I should reach out to her, that I should consider forgiveness and reconciliation. Maybe someday I will. But right now, I'm focused on building a life where people value me for who I am, not what I can do for them. I'm learning what healthy relationships look like, what mutual respect feels like, what it means to be part of a family that actually protects each other. The biggest lesson I learned from this whole experience is that love without respect isn't really love at all. Gerald and my mother said they loved me, but they didn't respect me enough to consider my feelings when they made plans for my future. They saw me as a resource to be used rather than a person to be valued. True family, the kind worth fighting for, doesn't sacrifice one member to save another. True family doesn't ask you to destroy your life to prove your loyalty. True family protects each other from harm, not from consequences. I used to think that being the person who never says no to family made me strong and loyal and good. Now I know that being the person who says no when saying no is necessary makes me all of those things and more. It makes me free. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where family members expected you to sacrifice everything for their benefit? Have you ever discovered that people you trusted were planning to betray you? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about finding the strength to stand up for yourself when the people closest to you let you down. Don't forget to share this video with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to say no to family when family is wrong. Thank you so much for listening to my story, and remember that you deserve relationships built on mutual respect and genuine love. Take care of yourselves out there.